It has been also our pride and joy that 4 students won prizes, 3 students won prizes in the essay competition organized during the British Day. And now they are Iman Slawi, Wafa Siddiqui, and Hisham bin Shukron. We have also 2 students, but here perhaps I make some mistakes, who also won prizes for a different participation to an essay and I think to building a website. And it's Tariq Bazaz, and they forgot to put the second name. And Asma Nafaq. They were rewarded this very morning in the presence of His Excellency Anthony Eden and Sir David Walker, and the member of the board. And other students, I say she's here, Asma Nafar, won the 2nd place in the public speaking competition sponsored by the British Council and the English Speaking Union in Rabat. Okay, it was complete. Not less important is the initiative of an increasing number of graduates who are preparing for the setting up of their own business during their studies. In so doing, they honor their university by their enterprising spirits and self-confidence. Dear graduates, ladies and gentlemen, this is nothing but a brief summary of the effort that the entire community makes to achieve its objective, your success. I would like to commend your commitment and perseverance, as well as that of our professors, academic officials, coordinators, deans, vice presidents, the Dean of Students Affairs and Students Affairs staff members, whose contribution to your training is manifest, and all university staff members also. On your behalf and in my name, I would like to thank them. I would like particularly to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Abdulatif bin Shrifa, our former Vice President for Academic Affairs, who has been appointed recently by His Majesty King Mohammed VI as President of Moulay Ismail University in Meknes. I wish to thank him for his exceptional commitment, his perseverance at work, and for his competence. He was for me a great companion, and while I regret his departure, I'm also happy for his well-deserved promotion. At this university, there are people who work behind the scenes with efficiency and perseverance. These are our board of trustees, to whom I express my gratitude for their support, with special reference to Mr. André Azoulay, advisor of His Majesty the King, for his interest, support, and invaluable assistance. I would like also to express my thanks to our Chancellor, President Othman Ben Jelloun, for his active multifaceted, and personal contribution, his effective attachment to the university, and his support for its president. I will not forget the other member of our Board of Trustees, namely His Excellency Khalid Angari, Minister of Higher Education in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, President Joel Stephen Trachtenberg, President of the George Washington University, and Mrs. Marcia Curley, who unfortunately couldn't attend this meeting, who have offered scholarships to our students. I thank them all sincerely. Dear graduates, ladies and gentlemen, in this moment, I would like to share with you my fond thoughts for the founder of this university, His Majesty the late King Hassan II. I would like to express my gratitude to His Majesty King Mohammed VI, the honorary president of this university, whose solicitude for and interest in the university have guided our steps and encouraged our initiatives. God bless you. Dear graduates, my warmest congratulations and my best wishes to the graduates and to their parents. Good luck to all of you, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, with your permission, a few minutes of your time. بعد التحية بدأ السيد الرئيس كلمته بمقولة للكاتب الفرنسي سيلين الذي قال ما معناه: من أشد حماقة الشباب أن يريدوا أن يصبحوا بالغين. سوف تنظرون بحنين إلى الأيام التي قضيتموها أعزائي الخريجين في الجامعة، وتتبخر الذكريات المؤلمة التي ولدتها الضغوط وقساوة المناخ والإدارة أحياناً، لتترك مكاناً لذكريات جميلة تشمل حتى حرس الجامعة المعروفين باسم جرين مان. إن عالم الشغل له متطلبات حاولت الجامعة أن تعدكم لمواجهتها عبر الدروس والأنشطة الموازية، والتي كان الهدف منها أيضاً تنمية روح المبادرة وروح النقد لديكم. لقد كانت لكم فرصة تعلم عدة لغات وفرصة الاحتكاك بهيئة تدريس دولية، سواء داخل الجامعة أو من خلال برامج التبادل مع جامعات أجنبية. لقد تعلمتم احترام الآخر في مكان يشجع على النقاش والحوار، وكانت لكم عدة فرص أذكر منها على سبيل المثال لقاء حول الإسلام في بريطانيا بمشاركة شخصيات مرموقة من بريطانيا، لقاء حول دور الجامعات بعد أحداث 11 من سبتمبر نظم خلال الأيام السعودية، مناظرة حول الأندلس الفردوس المفقود نظمته جامعة أركنسو، مناظرة الإيمان والعقل بمشاركة حوالي 30 عالماً من عدة بلدان. ورحب السيد الرئيس بعد ذلك بالضيوف الذين حضروا من خارج المغرب، من الولايات المتحدة، من الجامعات التي تربطنا معها علاقات صداقة وتبادل. كل هذا أعزائي الخريجين يجعل من جامعتكم مكاناً للثقافة والحوار كما أراده لها مؤسسها جلالة المغفور له الحسن الثاني طيب الله ثراه. لقد كان لمن سبقوكم دور ريادي، ولكم أنا سعيد عندما يتصل بي مشغلوهم ليثنوا عليهم. يتخرج اليوم أمامكم 177 خريجاً، 88 منهم من الإناث و89 من الذكور، ويريد السيد الرئيس أن يعرف اسم الطالب 89 الذي خلق الفرق. هؤلاء شهدوا تغيرات على مستوى المسبح الذي أصبح مفتوحاً وملاعب التنس والمكتبة، ولكن ربما لم ينتبهوا لما أنجز في برامج البحث ومراكز التطوير الأكاديمي. ورحب السيد الرئيس أيضاً برنامج التبادل الذي يربط الجامعة بالمكتب الشريف للفوسفات، وأثنى على كاتبه العام السيد الرغاي على مجهوداته في إنجاح هذا البرنامج. قال السيد الرئيس: أود هنا أن أنوه بصفة خاصة بالطالبتين حفيظة فوطة وليلى خاي اللتين حصلتا على جائزة البحث والتطوير 2001. هناك 4 طلبة أيضاً حصلوا على جائزة التعبير الكتابي وإعداد صفحة الإنترنت التي نظمت خلال الأيام البريطانية، وهم إيمان سلاوي، وفاء صديقي، هشام بن شقرون، وطارق بزاز. أما الطالبة أسماء نفر فقد حصلت على المركز الثاني في مباراة الإلقاء التي نظمها المجلس الثقافي البريطاني. بعد ذلك أثنى السيد الرئيس على نائب الرئيس للشؤون الأكاديمية السابق الدكتور عبد اللطيف بن شريفة الذي عينه صاحب الجلالة مؤخرا رئيسا لجامعة المولى إسماعيل بمكناس. أضاف السيد الرئيس: أود أن أثني في هذا المقام على الجهود الجبارة التي يبذلها أطر الجامعة، أساتذة وعمداء وموظفين ومستخدمين من أجل خدمة طلبة الجامعة. كما أود أن أشكر أعضاء مجلس الأمناء الجامعة، وأخص بالذكر سيد أندري أزولاي مستشار جلالة الملك ورئيس مجلس الأمناء السيد عثمان بن جلون وباقي أعضاء مجلس الأمناء. كما أثنى على الدكتور خالد العنقري والرئيس جورج تراختنبرغ لتوفيرهم لمنح لبعض طلبة الجامعة. أضاف السيد الرئيس: أود أن أستحضر معكم ذكرى مؤسس الجامعة جلالة المغفور له الحسن الثاني. كما أوجه شكرا خاصا إلى جلالة الملك محمد السادس الرئيس الشرفي لجامعتنا، الذي يقود خطانا ويلهمنا من خلال الاهتمام الذي يوليه للجامعة، وأتمنى بعد ذلك النجاح للطلبة وأولياء أمورهم. I'd like now to invite back the President of the University to introduce to you our keynote speaker. يتفضل الآن السيد رئيس الجامعة لتقديم السير ديفيد ووكر.
Well, I have to make some kind of improvisation as I have not a formal presentation of Sir David, but I would like first to welcome him at our university. It's a great pleasure and honor for me and for all of us to have him today with us. We made a suggestion just after the British days when we heard about the Moroccan-British Council for Investments who was taking place in London at the same time. And at this moment, the name of Sir David was, of course, on the highlights. So I just suggested at the right moment to His Excellency Mr. Anthony Leiden if we can invite Sir David Walker to be our keynote speaker for this year. He, of course, talked to him, and a few days later, he came back with the answer. Sir David accepted our invitation. Thank you very much. I would not come back on the forum presentation as our Chancellor said what had to be said about his career, but I just want to stress one thing very important for us. Having such a keynote speaker is not only an honor, but it will be for us a good lesson. His experience for more than 30 years and his involvement in the finance of the world, if I can say, with one of the most prestigious companies is something very important. I am sure that he will give you very interesting insights, advices, and probably look about what is happening in our world, and mainly with globalization. I think that this topic is in fact a matter of concern of many of us, and it's a matter that probably will influence your career and perhaps your lives in the future. But I know that he's going to speak about that, and please welcome with me Sir David Walker.
Excellencies, Chancellor, President, I was going to say ladies and gentlemen and then dear graduates, but that perhaps implies that the graduates are not ladies and gentlemen, so I won't say that. Well, it's a real privilege to have been invited to address this very distinguished and special gathering, an invitation that I can add to what the President said. I accepted not only quickly, but with enthusiasm. The truth is, vraiment que je suis academic manqué, not really an homme d'affaires. And I love universities, and the one with which I'm particularly associated, which is Cambridge in my own country. But one particular reason for my readiness to accept is the long and very friendly association between these two countries of Britain and Morocco. I understand from our ambassador that diplomatic links between our two countries go back at least 7 centuries, so not as old as the foundation of the first university in Morocco, but a very long time. And our trading relationships may have gone back much further. I haven't delved deeply into the history, so I'm not going to inflict that on you, but I know one very important continuing element, and I'll talk about that in a moment, is that while there have no doubt been aberrations on both sides, in both Morocco and in my country, both of our societies have traditionally been relatively tolerant, as indeed they are today. I'm very pleased also to be co-chairman of the new British-Moroccan Business Council, alongside Mr. Murad Sharif, who I think unfortunately can't be here today. We both, he and I, hope and expect that this initiative will boost in a tangible and practical way, because for this purpose we're running a business initiative, not a debating society. We want to boost in a very practical way trade and investment flows between our two countries to our mutual advantage. But enough of all that. Dear graduates, who are of course also ladies and gentlemen, a ceremony like this seems to me to provide an opportunity to reflect on the environment into which you're entering in your new working lives, whether you plan to seek your careers in business or the professions, in public administration, in research, or in the arts. The world into which you're now moving, and this is the cusp, an inflection point in your whole lives that you look back on and remember, is one that it would have been hard to imagine as little as 10 or 12 years ago. Let me just mention, for purposes of illustration, 2 or 3 features, 2 positive and 1 negative, all very relevant, whichever career path you decide to go for. First, the access to the rest of the world that's been made possible by the internet, in terms both of ease of communication, the email and all the rest, and the ready availability of an almost bewildering amount of content, means that in many ways geographic location has become much less important, not more important, less important than previously. So put in other terms, the possibility of a challenging and satisfying career within a country like Morocco has been dramatically enhanced, in my view, by the advance of technology. Second is the extraordinary economic growth that's been seen in the United States, in particular on the back of the technology revolution, the benefits of which have been spread very widely around the world, not always equitably, I acknowledge, and the success of public policy in managing economies, and in particular in dealing with something which you graduates have probably never really knew much about, but I can tell you in my lifetime was a pernicious disease, that of inflation. Third, now negative, because those were 2 positives, is the extent to which the glacial certainties of the Cold War have now been displaced by the volatile uncertainties and in many ways still more dangerous tensions linked to terrorism and the widespread availability of quite devastating weaponry. Well, when we stand back from this troubled world scene, it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that perhaps the biggest destabilizing force at work, and I'm interested in the roots, not the surface, the most destabilizing force at work today, as it has been for many years, is that of intolerance. Whether that intolerance is aimed at Jewry, Islam, Christianity, or people of particular race, color, or political persuasion. Intolerance, sometimes cloaked seductively as a commitment to high principles, is a destructive and negative force, and it's also often contagious, as we've seen recently in some major European countries, not excluding my own. Perhaps we can draw some comfort from the words of a contemporary British philosopher and writer, Bernard Levin, and I quote, "In every age of transition, men are never so firmly bound to one way of life as when they're about to abandon it, so that fanaticism and intolerance reach their most intense forms just before tolerance and mutual acceptance come to be the natural order of things." Is it too optimistic to think that we may now be in such an age of transition, away from the intense intolerance that has until now and is still so evident around us? Good news and bad news. At least the recent NATO accord with Russia, signed by Presidents Bush and Putin, is a hugely positive step, scarcely imaginable a decade ago. Sadly, on the very negative side, we see tension increasing, apparently by the hour, between two nuclear-armed nation-states in Kashmir. None of us can have a confident answer whether optimism is immediately justified. Well, I chose intolerance as my first theme, not just because we need to be alert to it and of the havoc that it tends to bring in its wake, but also because we can, over time, do something about it as individuals. It can be rolled back if there's sufficient proactive commitment to the counteracting and releasing force of tolerance. It doesn't require a shared faith or agreement to be tolerant. Perhaps most simply, it requires the modesty that we ourselves may not always be right in all respects, and that other points of view may be entirely reasonable and quite likely to be held by others in good faith. We shouldn't delude ourselves that intolerance is only a political matter. The phenomenon of so-called political correctness, where the required correctness goes well beyond the political sphere, is, in my view, an insidious new form of intolerance, which leads individuals or groups to assert some principle to outlaw activities that they don't like. All of this is intrusive and intolerant. I describe tolerance in these terms because I want to suggest to you, in particular, the new graduates, that the working lives on which you're setting out after today's ceremony afford you, as the new generation, with the benefit of an excellent higher education here, the opportunity to display and spread tolerance. You can be change agents. Challenge the intolerance which is the enemy of us all. Opportunities to do this will arise in all the areas into which your careers may take you, because intolerance grows everywhere like a weed and needs to be challenged wherever it's found, whether it's in politics, business, professional, university life, or anywhere else. Theme 1, tolerance. Theme 2, tolerance doesn't mean passivity or uncritical acceptance of what comes our or your way. This leads to my second theme, which is the importance of appropriate initiative, and above all, and I address this in particular to the graduates, the exercise of will. For some of all of us, there's a disposition to be patiently reactive and accepting, perhaps on the basis that is not unfamiliar in the great faiths of Islam or Christianity, that Allah or the Lord will provide and care for us. There's a concept or belief in the faith that I know best, the Christian faith, of all-sufficient grace, which has at times been used to justify minimizing the relevance and potential contribution of individual will and endeavor. Of course, there's the danger that the exercise of will itself involves intolerance, but that's not the inevitable outcome, obviously. I'm not going to lose myself or my distinguished audience in the wilderness of philosophy which sprouts exotically whenever anyone talks about will. But I do want to mention that from my study of history and modest experience, I've come to the somber but very emphatic conclusion that at the level of the individual, and I'm very much addressing this to the new graduates, Will is one of the core drivers of our and your lives, often more potent as a force in business and politics and what you can contribute to them than knowledge, intelligence, ability, or ideology. Without will, an individual is likely to fail sooner or later. With will, I suggest to you that it's extraordinary how far a determined individual can go, even when weighty forces are lined up on the other side. We all know that there are abundant good and bad examples in the realm of politics of will coupled with intolerance. But the importance of will is difficult to overestimate in the failures and achievements of our own lives. One way of putting this is to see the disjoint or the disjuncture between the limited product of passivity and mere acceptance and the creativity and achievement of those who have initiative, as I hope all of you graduates will have and will display. There's a sort of globalization paradox here. Sitting here today in the premier university of a very attractive, but it has to be said, small, developing economy, it may be tempting to play down the opportunity even for you well-educated graduates within Morocco, given the pervasive and apparently awesome influence of the global corporation, headquartered in New York or the West Coast or in Europe. How can even a well-qualified graduate like you from an emerging economy such as Morocco hope to break in, so to speak, to the global network? I ask that as a question. But I give you my answer. There are ways, and they're for you to find. To deny this possibility that you can break in would be to disregard some key factors in the recent and prospective environment. For example, that a major trend in global corporations, which includes my own, is to outsource major areas, blocks of activity in important value-adding areas of intellectual activity like software development. In the case of my firm, we do software development employing large numbers of graduates in 21 emerging economies, apart from outsourcing also to developed countries. Morocco could be another of those economies where we outsource. In the United States, many of the most creative and successful entrepreneurs in the new technology space are either non-American or first-generation Americans, and the typical age of those who scale the heights of corporate leadership has fallen dramatically over the last few years, and partly because of the forward march of technology, which has very little respect for the establishment or tradition that's represented on the platform here today. If I may speak thus to my peer group, mobility in business in all directions, prominently involving the young, is greater than ever before. So much for business life. But in academic life, to take another possible career track, many of the external influences are similar and similarly powerful. For example, through the possibility of immediate access to research papers via the web on which academics in the States and in Europe generally publish them. The consequence is that serious academics in almost any discipline are bound to be and are able to be attentive in a real-time way to the development of thinking elsewhere. That's in reality the globalization of academic life, and seems to me to bring great enrichment to the thought processes of a university like this, Mr. President, and to those who work here. Plainly, not everyone can be a successful entrepreneur, but I hope that all of the new graduates who are perhaps going to start new businesses of their own are indeed successful entrepreneurs. Not everyone can end up in their preferred vocation in the professions or academic life, but in my experience, few, and none of you will know what you are capable of unless you strive, ready to accept that a reverse or a defeat in one phase doesn't mean that you'll have a reverse or be defeated in later phases. An observing experience in the United States, and to a lesser extent, but increasingly in my own country, Society, I think, is increasingly ready to accept that business failure does not mean a failure of integrity on the part of the individual, nor does it exclude or discourage the ability of the individual to pick himself or herself up and start again. So my message to you is to have a vision of what you want to achieve. Try to be clear about that. Then adjust it upwards by several notches as a spur to focus. If the bar you set for yourself isn't high, you won't be stretched. And I submit that from the work you've been doing here in the last 3 or 4 years, you all perform better and know that you perform better if you're being stretched. And then strive for it with a will to succeed. If you succeed in business, you, your company, and quite likely your country will benefit. If you don't, try again and plan to succeed next time. It's altogether mistaken, and I can't give this enough emphasis, it's altogether mistaken to see globalization and the emergence of major global companies with their massive influence on world trade and all the rest as sidelining or diminishing the scope for successful initiative from within a nation like Morocco. I acknowledge that these comments have been particularly focused on careers in business, where the impact of globalization is perhaps most immediately evident. But I've no intent to exclude others and suggest that will to succeed is just as important in other walks of life. Think, for example, of the luster that can be brought to a university such as this, and potentially the nation as a whole, by an individual whose determined and successful research endeavour in the arts or sciences rolls out a frontier of knowledge. You'll be glad to know, in this last part of my remarks, I want to apply these themes of tolerance and will to the nation state, with particular reference to an emerging economy such as this. Just as we, as individuals, can feel alienated or driven into an inward-looking intolerance in the face of contemporary pressures like globalization, so a nation state which perceives its social, economic, cultural sovereignty to be under threat can react similarly. The focus of these remarks is on a nation state that's an emerging economy, but I have to say similar issues arise for a developed economy like my own country, the United Kingdom, where there's, as you know, intense concern at the prospective loss of sovereignty involved in abandoning sterling and ceding more of the country's autonomy in defence and foreign affairs to some European grouping. These particular concerns are regional rather than global, but much the same issues arise. A core question, whether the relevant questions or choices are regional or global, is how much autonomy an individual nation state can really hope to maintain in a globalized environment, in particular differentiating between appearance and substance. A major and topical feature of discussion in emerging economies and on development policy and all the rest centres on their relationships at present with the major international financial institutions, in particular the World Bank and the IMF. There's currently a very lively debate between those like Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize winner, the former chief economist of the World Bank, who argue that the international financial institutions have been overbearing, insensitive, and just on occasion plain wrong in their approach to emerging economies, and another school led by other prominent economists like Larry Summers at Harvard, former US Treasury Secretary, and Stan Fisher, both former chief economists at the World Bank, who take a more defensive view. Part of the difference of view is about the handling by these institutions of specific events like the Asian crisis in 1997 and 1998, which seemed a long way away from Morocco, but which was hugely significant. But leaving aside the specifics of particular cases, underlying much of the difference of view in this very important policy discussion is the judgment to be made about an appropriate balance. And that's the balance between an understandable and proper concern on the part of the international community to ensure that help to emerging economies is introduced in a disciplined way, in a disciplined framework, and on the other side, to respect local culture and tradition. Let me set this in a historical context. Since the end of the Cold War, I just need to remind you that's not much more than a decade ago, a new generation of leaders has emerged in the developing world, freed from, very largely, from the memory and incubus of earlier colonization, whether this was from my country, France, Spain, Italy. Alongside, globalization has brought the prospect of fuller integration into a prosperous world economy. But it's come increasingly to be realized that the transformation that's possible can't be imposed from outside, from Washington or London or Brussels, and the attempt to impose it from outside can be highly counterproductive. In response to these changes, the international institutions are evolving a new approach to thinking about development that's more inclusive in its approach, and it's what Jim Wolfenson of the World Bank has called putting the country in the driver's seat, putting Morocco in the driver's seat. Stated in these terms, the goal is obviously attractive. The question is how it can be accomplished. If developing countries really are to be in the driver's seat, they have to have the capacity to analyze in a rigorous way the difficult economic and social issues they face, drawing on the best global thinking in doing so. Local researchers, perhaps here in this university, combining the knowledge of local conditions, local political, social structures, provide the best prospect for deriving development policies that are effective and enjoy broad support. The question isn't whether a developing country is open or closed to outside knowledge. It's a matter of being open to outside knowledge that's in a way that respects local autonomy. Let me just quote Gandhi, a long time away in history and a long time away in geography, but very relevant. He said, and I quote, "I don't want my house to be closed in on all sides and my windows to be stuffed, étouffé. I want the cultures of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible, but I refuse to be blown off my feet." Well, I want to suggest to you in particular to the new graduates, only by being on one's feet from an intellectual standpoint can the local doers have the self-confidence to collect, assimilate, and adapt the external knowledge instead of being overwhelmed and rendered intellectually dependent and subservient, which you do not want to be. I've been talking about the nation state, and it's difficult for you, the graduates, to focus on that. But the parallels are, in my view, very powerful with the two earlier themes of tolerance and will for the individual. If a nation state, if a sovereign can intellectually sustain and develop its own culture,